Good afternoon or evening, depending on what time you're watching this. My name is Jordan Knock, and I am also enrolled in your Management 435 Communicating and International Business course, instructed by Dr. Aristides Perea. And for this assignment, as you well know, we had to deliver a oral and verbal presentation um, about one of various different uh, categories that we could choose from. And for my presentation, I wanted to choose international trade agreements. And in discussing international trade agreements, I wanted to go over some key events that kind of played a pivotal role involved in international trade agreements. I also wanted to discuss some factors to consider before considering entering international trade. I wanted to go over then kind of some, for what I thought, because there are an innumerable amount of trade agreements through a lot of different countries that we could discuss. But for the sake of this project and due to the amount of time that we do have, I just wanted to go over a couple kind of key trade agreements that I thought were pivotal, that being the Central American Integration System Agreement and the North American Free Trade Agreement. So, to bring it back to the top, I first want to begin with key events involved in international trade. Um, One of the first things that I think we need to take note of is the GATT, which is known as the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, which was formed in 1947 by 23 different nations with the sole purpose of trying to promote free trade between different nations, where you're going to be minimizing tariffs and minimizing the barriers that can go involved with entering that trade. Second factor that I like to talk about is the World Trade Organization, which is an international organization that regulates trade between nations. And the next one is going to be the World Bank, which is useful in financing economic projects in developing countries. And then one factor that hits a little bit closer to home, one example of kind of where international trade can go bad, which we Americans, is a little bit before whenever we were born, but it's known as the U.S. embargo with Cuba, also known as the El Bloqueo. Forgive my awful pronunciation. But this was just, as you may or may not know, this was a trade embargo implemented against Cuba from the United States, where we were trying to restrict and stop all forms of trade and partnership with the country of Cuba. But I go back, I like to begin. I gave you a little bit of information about GATT, but I'd like to talk a little bit more about what the World Trade Organization seeks to accomplish. The World Trade Organization is the only global international organization dealing with the rules and trade between all different nations. At its heart of the World Trade Agreements, it's negotiated and signed by the bulk of the world's trading nations and ratified by their governing bodies. The goal being to help producers of goods and services and exporters and importers conduct within their business. The World Trade Organization, it's also ran by its own kind of governing body, where all major decisions are made by their whole, either by, kind of like these different level of steps you can go within the governing body. They have levels known as ministers, ambassadors, and delegates. The ministers meet every couple of years. Ambassadors, delegates meeting even more regularly than that. But the decisions are only made by overall consensus. So that's a really strong thing to consider, the fact that there's many different countries and just literally millions of people that can be affected by decisions and implementations on government regulatory actions, or new taxes, or whatever they might be that could be restricting or hampering, or hurting another population from gaining some type of benefit from a product or service otherwise not offered in a country. The World Trade Organization, it's different than other international organizations like the World Bank, which I also mentioned and which we'll go into further detail about later. The World Trade Organization, it's not delegated to a board of directors or to the organization's head, so it doesn't have one like head president or one person making these final decisions. And the rules that it imposes on countries or policies that are outcome of negotiations among its members. So this is again just saying that they really do their due diligence to make sure that all parties involved are being taken account of and cared for. The World Bank, as I mentioned a little bit before, the World Bank, what they really do is they mainly go after those countries that are still developing, because as we know, the countries that are still in further development, they don't have the economic resources to that would really want to attract these other businesses that do have the resources and products that they either want to create or sell. They're not going to go to these developing countries if they don't have the infrastructure to facilitate building it, if they don't have the people there with the money to buy it. So there's two different sides that you're producing or consuming. The World Bank seeks to go into those countries that are still developing and fund so they can create the infrastructure and the facilities necessary to, like I said, to either produce these products or to help the people that don't have the resources necessary to acquire these products and services that they otherwise don't have. Um, I'd like to now talk a little bit more about the trade embargo between the United States and Cuba. Again, this was just kind of a case of whenever things can go south. Um, due to, I have notes. Here we go. Um, Due to political tensions between the United States and Cuba, that's what halted the trade between these two countries. So citizens like myself and like yourself and like those in Cuba, they weren't able to receive the products and services that they so desperately needed. In the United States, we were not able to acquire different sugars or Tabascos, or more importantly, different petroleum products that Cuba was producing that we in the United States weren't able to produce on our own, or at least to the same high quality. But as mentioned before, in Cuba and in other developing countries, the ramifications of such trade cutoffs are really such worse, as these less developed countries don't have the necessary resources to otherwise go somewhere else to get these desired trade products. As the Cuba, they're pretty reliant upon, like I said, the developing countries are usually more reliant on developed countries as is, but Cuba, through geographic um, situations, they're not able to go to outside sources and other mediums to try and get goods that they would need. Um, and as you heard me so awfully butcher the pronunciation earlier of El Bloqueo, it's known as this because it's called, or translates to the blockade, which again goes back to the political tensions that were going on at the time. Because at the time they were literally, in 1962 or 60 when this was happening, there were literally U.S. naval ships that were blocking ports, either import or exporting in the area of Cuba. So it's still kind of affectionately known as that today. Um, Furthermore, here, the next thing I'd like to talk to you about are just some real quick factors that, due to this class and other courses like in international management or what have you, we might be a little more aware of, but I wanted to go over them because it is an important thing to take into account of. There are different factors to consider before entering international trade. You have to take into account the different cultures. When you're going into another country, you always have to be cognizant of the other people's values, their beliefs, the rules and institutions that all of the people hold, whether it be the business people you're looking to interact with, or if it's just the shareholders of the people that just live there that are going to be affected by the business practices and products produced that your company is looking to do. Um, Another factor you have to consider is the different political systems. Um, you just heard me talk about the United States and Cuba's you know tensions that they were having and the type of ramifications that brought about to the people. But that was just one example. There are a lot larger ones. You have to, take into account in World War II what happened between the entire economy of Europe and the Western world. They just had a complete and utter downfall. Excuse me. Following the war, it took decades upon decades for the people to be able to recover. And finally, you also have to look at the potential drawbacks of engaging in international trade, whether you're going to the country or if you're allowing another country to come practice business in your borders. You have to think about the loss of national sovereignty, which for a lot of South American and Latin cultures, this is a very big deal. A lot of businesses are going into more struggling parts of Mexico and they're opening operations. And granted, there are bringing jobs and bringing benefits to the people of Mexico, but they're also certain Mexican people are feeling they're kind of being overran and kind of unilaterally decided on issues and topics by the United States and by these infiltrating businesses. So now I'm kind of giving you a little bit of a background and kind of some general things to think about. Now we can go ahead and talk about some of these bigger trade agreements. The first being the Central American Integration System. Excuse me. Some quick facts on it. The Central American Integration System, there's a great mission statement or quote about the company. I don't know if it's an official statement or not, but it was a great quote that I heard or that I read when investigating this further. And it really shows you the passion and also the purpose behind what they're seeking to accomplish with the SICA agreement. And the quote says, establishing the fundamental objective of realizing the integration of Central America in order to transform the area into a region of peace, liberty, democracy, and development based firmly on the respect, tutelage, and promotion of human rights. So like I said, that statement really kind of resonated with me about the type of passion and purpose that they have in trying to accomplish their goals. It is Central American Integration System, so it's mainly founded between countries like Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Panama, Nicaragua, and then most recently Belize. But it's also overseen by a lot of other countries like Argentina, Peru, Ecuador, Uruguay, Colombia, a lot of different kind of concerned third parties, if you will. It was originally established in 1962, but later then amended in 1993 and put into place and known as what's called the Tegucigalpa Protocol. Whenever it was finally ratified and put into place. So finally, the last one that I'd like to talk to you about is known as NAFTA, or the North American Free Trade Agreement. North American Free Trade Agreement includes, as well, United States, Canada, and Mexico. This was implemented in 1994, and it is to date the world's largest free trade area, linking over 450 million people and producing over $17 trillion in goods and services since its implementation, which has only been for a decade, as I previously stated. The different kind of like a couple quick facts on it to show you how important and detrimental this agreement is to these different countries. Exports have totaled over $600 billion from the United States. Imports almost $650 billion. So as you can see, the United States is buying more of these products and services than you might think, kind of saying that we're the ones that are more dependent and reliant on these outside factors. Not to say that they're not, benefiting from this agreement on their own. As recently as Canada has totaled $527 billion in goods exported, $613 billion imported, and Mexico itself has currently seems to be the most dependent of the countries, as it doesn't have the same buying power as the United States and Canada, but it is buying up seems like per capita more resources and services and goods from the neighboring countries than the other. But again, these are just kind of like some key points I wanted to talk to you about. I wanted to go over again to summarize some critical trade agreements, the SICA and the NAFTA. I also wanted to go over some important factors to remember before engaging in international trade, as well as the factors to be cognizant of when engaging in international trade. Hopefully you learned a little bit of something, as I know that I did from watching your videos, and go easy on me. All right, have a good evening.